Amazon's Mr. and Mrs. Smith Season 1 features a great and highly original soundtrack. Starring Donald Glover and Maya Erskine, Mr. and Mrs. Smith is more of a remixed version of the original 2005 action comedy starring Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie than it is a close remake. Created by Glover and fellow Atlanta writer Francesca Sloan, the show is one of 2024's first must-watch television series, with a Mr. and Mrs. Smith Season 1 cliffhanger ending already sparking rumors of a highly anticipated Season 2. In addition to its innovative soundtrack, Mr. and Mrs. Smith features an outstanding musical score from composer David Fleming, The Last of Us, Blue Planet 2, Dune. The Amazon Prime Video original series has garnered an impressive 87% certified fresh score on Rotten Tomatoes, in part due to its thought-provoking spin on the original concept and the exceptional performances from Mr. and Mrs. Smith's ensemble cast. The Mr. and Mrs. Smith soundtrack makes up a large part of the series' overall impact and tone, featuring a number of classic love songs as well as music from up-and-coming and independent artists. Episode 1. First Date. Donald Glover as John and Maya Erskine as Jane laughing on a bench in Mr. and Mrs. Smith. You Belong to Me, by Patsy Cline feat. The Jordanaires, the first song featured in Mr. and Mrs. Smith, can be heard around the 4:30 mark of the first episode. The song starts to play after the surprise twist deaths of Alexander Skarsgård and Isa Gonzalez's characters and carries into the character introductions of John and Jane Smith, Donald Glover, Maya Erskine, before they have their intake screenings with Hi Hi. The theme of the song is fitting since John and Jane essentially give their lives to the other person through the arranged marriage. Easy Lovers, by Piero Piccioni. This song faintly plays in the background around the 20-minute mark as John and Jane start their first mission in a cafe. The newlyweds essentially go on their first date and learn more about each other while they stake out their first target. Despite only being the second song in the hour-long episode, it's also the last. It captures the mood of the intimate moment between these two as if speaking to how they are trying to appear to the world around them. Episode 2. Second Date. Donald Glover as John and Maya Erskine as Jane in Mr. and Mrs. Smith TV series. Pearls, by Alton Ellis. This classic love song from Jamaican singer-songwriter Alton Ellis arrives around the 7-minute mark in Second Date. Maya returns from getting bagels and having an impromptu conversation with hot neighbor, Paul Dano, who asks questions about John and Jane's professions. At this point, John and Jane are still getting used to living together despite hardly knowing each other at all. The song is another example of romance bleeding into their fake domestic world as if influencing them together. Sandstorm, by Darude. This now iconic EDM song appears around the 29-minute mark in Mr. and Mrs. Smith Episode 2. After double-dosing their target Eric Shane, John Turturro, with truth serum, they take the intoxicated man back to their house to try and sober him up. When Eric inadvertently dies, John and Jane are forced to dispose of their first dead target. It is the perfect surreal and bombastic song to replicate his wild drug trip. Hallucinations, by Roy Budd. This mesmerizing track plays at the end of Mr. and Mrs. Smith Episode 2 as John and Jane have sex for the first time. Before the song plays into the end credits, John and Jane receive a message from Hi Hi informing them that they had failed their mission and only have 2 fails remaining. It is a song that connects not only to the truth serum plot of the episode but also adds a blissful feeling to John and Jane giving into their passion.